concludes the public testimony and the public hearing on Substitute House Bill 1389, and would now ask for a staff briefing on Substitute House Bill 1474. Again, Ms. Van Horn and Ms. Vasek. Good evening.
Good evening again, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Audrey Vasek, staff to the Housing Committee. Substitute House Bill 1474 creates the Covenant Homeownership Account and Program to address the history of housing discrimination due to racially restrictive real estate covenants in Washington State. There is a proposed second substitute available offered by Representative Chop. I'll brief the proposed second substitute. At a high level, the proposed second substitute creates the Covenant Homeownership Account and a document recording assessment of $100 beginning January 1, 2024 to fund the Covenant Homeownership Program. Certain types of documents are exempt from the $100 assessment, including documents recording name change orders, birth, marriage, divorce, or death, and certain types of liens. As part of the program, the Department of Commerce must contract with the Housing Finance Commission to create one or more special purpose credit programs to provide down payment and closing cost assistance to economically disadvantaged classes of persons identified in a Covenant Homeownership Program study. The Commission is required to complete an initial study by March 1st, 2024, and updated studies every 5 years afterwards. Among other things, the study must include recommendations related to creation of a special purpose credit program to remedy the impacts of past and ongoing discrimination against Black, Indigenous, and people of color and other historically marginalized communities in Washington State. To be eligible to receive down payment and closing cost assistance under a special purpose credit program, an applicant must have a household income at or below 100% of the area median income, be a first-time home buyer, and be a Washington State resident who was or is a descendant of a person who was a resident of the state on or before April 11th, 1968, which is when the Federal Fair Housing Act was enacted, and was or would have been excluded from homeownership under a racially restrictive real estate covenant on or before that date. By July 1, 2024, these special purpose credit programs must begin providing down payment and closing cost assistance. The bill exempts certain financial information and records supplied by individuals during applications for loans or services under the program from the Public Records Disclosure, excuse me. The bill also creates an oversight committee consisting of both legislative and non-legislative members to oversee and review the Commission's activities. And the Department of Financial Institutions must provide subject matter expertise, administrative support, and staff support to the committee. With that, I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Good evening. Once again, Jessica Van Horn, staff to this committee. A fiscal note is not available for the proposed second substitute, but a preliminary fiscal note for the substitute is available in your EBB, and in many cases should be similar to the proposed second sub. I'll base my remarks on that fiscal note as well as discussions with the Department of Commerce. The revenue impacts from the bill are indeterminate. The bill creates a new document recording fee of $100 per document beginning January 1st, 2024. The number of documents that will be recorded each year is difficult to predict due to fluctuations in the number of home sales and the rate of refinancing. However, Commerce has provided for illustrative purposes an estimate of 1 million documents subject to the fee being recorded each year. Using that estimate, the fee would bring in approximately $50 million in fiscal year 24 and $100 million per fiscal year thereafter. County auditors may retain up to 1% of those revenues for their administrative costs. Using those assumptions, local governments would retain up to $500,000 in fiscal year 24 and $1 million thereafter for their administrative costs. All remaining revenues would be deposited into the new Covenant Homeownership Program account. Moving to expenditures, the Department of Commerce may expend up to 1% of the remaining revenues on administrative expenses for the department, the Housing Finance Commission, and the Department of Financial Institutions. Again, using that 1 million document assumption, that would allow for $495,000 in fiscal year 24 and $990,000 per fiscal year thereafter from the new Covenant Homeownership Program account for administrative costs. Any costs above that amount would presumably be paid for using general fund. All remaining revenues would be used by the Washington Housing Finance Commission and the Department of Commerce for the new special purpose credit programs created under the bill. The amounts available would be about $49 million in fiscal year 24 and $98 million per fiscal year thereafter. The Department of Financial Institutions assumes costs of $245,000 in fiscal year '24 and $239,000 per fiscal year thereafter to administer the Oversight Committee. DFI would be reimbursed by the Department of Commerce out of that 1% for administrative expenses. And then the Housing Finance Commission assumes costs of $480,000 general fund state in fiscal year '24 to conduct the first program study that's required under the bill. Those costs are general fund state because they would be incurred before the document recording fee goes into effect. And the change in the reporting date and the proposed second stub should not change the total impact of the costs. And that concludes our remarks.
Thank you both very much. We have a question from Representative Schmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, in the bill report, currently, I believe there's a $13 affordable housing, a $62 local homeless housing, and $8 local homeless housing assistance surcharge, and then a $100 surcharge that was enacted in 2021. This, what we're talking about tonight, is in addition to these that are currently there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Schmick. Are there any other questions for Ms. Vazig or Ms. Van Horn? Not seeing any other questions. Thank you. A very thorough briefing. And we'll now go to public testimony on 1474. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one signed in person. Nathan Gordon, are you here? Please come forward.
Sure.
Oh, okay. And then online in the Zoom room, if we can move Patience Malaba, Corinna Obar, and Sean Scott. And when you're ready, if you could please state your name. Thank you.
My apologies, Chair Ormsby and members of the committee. Nathan Gorton is unable to be here and sends his deepest apologies and asks that I stand in his place. For the record, my name is Mary Hull Drury on behalf of Washington Realtors. Historically, Realtors have been opposed to increases to the document recording fee. However, considering what this bill proposes to address, we're happy to support House Bill 1474. Homeownership provides a great deal of security, whether it's to help build equity, pay for college, or help family members. Sadly, many Washingtonians have been denied this security, and we believe this bill is a step in the right direction toward reducing racial disparities in homeownership. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. Patience?
It's Jesse here. I'm Jesse Simpson. I'm reading a statement on behalf of Patience Malaba. I am the Government Relations and Policy Manager for the Housing Development Consortium. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. We know that the housing crisis in our state continues to intensify, and that affordable homeownership is the best way to address access to homeownership. It has continued to be elusive for so many people. HB 1474 is a significant opportunity for us as a state to create more affordable homeownership opportunities for those who our systems have intentionally deemed unworthy of credit and access to homeownership. This is a harm that's been done by the state, and this bill is a tool towards proactive remedy. We're counting on you to lead and deliver. Please support HB 1474. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. Corinna?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Karina Obar, and I'm the manager of the homeownership programs at the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. We're excited about this legislation and to be a key instrument in the homeownership covenant program. Since 1983, the Commission has provided home loans and down payment assistance to more than 100,000 families across the state that comes with robust home buyer education and many pre-purchase financial counseling to ensure long-term success. We have the expertise, experience, and partnerships with lenders, real estate professionals across the state to implement this program immediately. With home prices soaring out of sight, much deeper down payment assistance is needed, especially in communities of color. Last fiscal year, we helped 5,600 families to buy a home in Washington, but only 7% of them were Black families, 17% Latinx, 4% Asian, and about 3% Indigenous or Native. Programs based on race are needed, programs that explicitly undo a lasting impact of discrimination, not just with outreach efforts, but actual funding that unlocks opportunities for these families. We urge you to support this legislation, start to undo the state's legacy of housing discrimination, and change the future for BIPOC families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Obar. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. Sean? Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Representative Gregerson, and good evening to members of the committee. I'm Sean Scott with the Statewide Poverty Action Network and a former researcher with the Seattle Civil Rights and Labor History Project, which worked to track a good number of these covenants in Washington state. Here in Washington, government policy really enforced segregation throughout the 20th century. There was a 1960 state Supreme Court decision which upheld, quote, the right of segregation, end quote, and another 1961 state Supreme Court decision that permitted real estate companies in this state to practice segregation on the basis of race. In 2021, the Washington State Legislature passed House Bill 1335 to track and document racially restrictive housing deeds across the state. 40,000 of them were found. The research is still preliminary, and many of them remain on the books to this day. Housing segregation in Washington was a state-enforced practice, the ramifications of which are measured in comparatively low rates of Black and brown ownership, disproportionately poor neighborhoods that are subject to over-policing, and the underextension of government resources. At Statewide Poverty Action Network, we really feel like House Bill 1474 gives this body a chance to right those wrongs by imposing this fee on segregation as covenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. That's it for those choosing to testify.
Thank you very much. Would like to get a staff briefing